Welcome to Mr. Horror, where the most bone-chilling tales of terror are brought to life. Today, we present to you 3 pregnancy horror stories that will make you shudder with fear. These stories will take you on a journey through the horror of pregnancy, showing you the dark and terrifying side of the most natural of human experiences. Get ready to be scared out of your wits as we dive into these terrifying tales. Katie had always dreamed of being a mother, so when she found out she was pregnant, she was over the moon with excitement. Her husband, Jack, was thrilled too. They couldn't wait to start their family together. But as the weeks went on, Katie started to feel like something was off. She was constantly exhausted, even more so than she had been in the first trimester. She was also having strange dreams, vivid and unsettling images that left her feeling uneasy when she woke up. Katie tried to brush off her worries, chalking it up to normal pregnancy symptoms. But one night, as she was getting ready for bed, she saw something that made her blood run cold. She was brushing her teeth when she caught a glimpse of something moving in the mirror behind her. She turned around to see nothing out of the ordinary, but when she turned back to the mirror, she saw it again, a shadowy figure lurking in the corner of the room. Katie froze, unsure of what to do. She tried to tell herself it was just her imagination, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Over the next few days, Katie started to notice more strange occurrences. Objects would move on their own, as if being pushed by an unseen force. She would hear strange whispers in the middle of the night, but when she tried to find the source of the sound, no one was there. As her due date drew closer, Katie became increasingly scared. She didn't know what was happening to her, but she knew it wasn't normal. She started to feel like she was being stalked by something malevolent, something that wanted to harm her and her unborn child. Katie knew she needed help, but she didn't know who to turn to. She was too scared to tell Jack, afraid he would think she was going crazy. But she knew she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. She had to find out what was happening to her before it was too late. As the weeks went on, the nightmares became more vivid and terrifying. They were always the same, a shadowy figure looming over her, whispering in her ear and touching her swollen belly with cold, clammy hands. Katie tried to tell her husband about the dreams, but he dismissed them as a common pregnancy side effect. She couldn't blame him. After all, he wasn't the one experiencing the nightly horrors. But it wasn't just the nightmares that were getting to her. Katie started to notice strange things happening around the house. Objects would move on their own, doors would creak open in the middle of the night, and she could hear faint whispers coming from empty rooms. At first, she tried to convince herself that it was all in her head, but one night, she woke up to find the shadowy figure from her dream standing at the foot of her bed. She screamed for her husband, but when he turned on the light, the figure disappeared into thin air. Katie was starting to feel like she was losing her mind. She sought solace in online pregnancy forums, hoping to find others who had experienced something similar. But all she found were stories of happy, expectant mothers, with no mention of the horrors that she was enduring. She began to isolate herself from friends and family, afraid that they would think she was crazy if she told them what was happening. But as her due date drew closer, Katie knew that she couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. One night, when her husband was out of town on a business trip, Katie woke up to find the shadowy figure standing right next to her bed. But this time, it wasn't just whispering in her ear, it was speaking in a language that she didn't recognize, with a voice that sounded like it came from the depths of hell. Katie tried to scream, but her voice was caught in her throat. She felt a sharp pain in her belly and suddenly realized that the figure was trying to harm her unborn child. With all the strength she could muster, Katie forced herself out of bed and ran out of the house. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from whatever was inside her home. As she ran down the street, Katie could hear the figure's voice echoing in her mind. It promised to follow her wherever she went, to take her child and leave her with nothing but despair. Katie was consumed by fear and desperation. She knew she had to find a way to protect her unborn child, but she didn't know how. All she could do was run, hoping to outrun the horrors that had invaded her life. Finally, Katie gathered the courage to speak with her doctor about her experiences. She explained everything, from the strange dreams to the shadowy figure in the corner of her room. At first, the doctor tried to reassure her that it was all in her head, a result of pregnancy hormones and stress. But as Katie continued to describe her experiences, the doctor's expression shifted. She became more serious, asking Katie detailed questions about what she had seen and heard. In the end, the doctor recommended that Katie see a specialist, someone who could help her better understand what was happening to her. She gave her the name of a woman who was said to be an expert in paranormal activity and the occult. Katie was hesitant at first. She didn't believe in ghosts or demons or any of that, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized she had nowhere else to turn. The specialist, a woman named Dr. Martinez, met with Katie and listened carefully to her story. She asked probing questions and took notes as Katie spoke. When she was finished, Dr. Martinez sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. "I believe you," she said finally. "I believe that there is something in your home, something that means you harm." Katie felt a sense of relief wash over her. Finally, someone understood what she was going through. Dr. Martinez explained that there were certain rituals and spells that could be used to banish negative energies from a space, but it wouldn't be easy. It would require a lot of preparation and focus. Katie was willing to do whatever it took to protect herself and her baby. She worked with Dr. Martinez over the next few weeks, following her instructions to the letter. They burned sage, recited incantations, and performed other arcane rituals. At first, it seemed like nothing was happening. The strange occurrences continued, and Katie began to lose hope. But then, gradually, things started to shift. The whispers in the night became less frequent, and the shadows in the corner of the room disappeared. Finally, on the night of Katie's due date, she went into labor. It was a difficult delivery, but in the end, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. When she held her daughter for the first time, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. It was as if all the fear and anxiety of the past few months had been washed away. As Katie looked down at her daughter's face, she knew that whatever had been haunting her was gone for good. She had faced her fears and come out on the other side stronger and braver than ever before. Mia and her husband, Alex, were thrilled to discover that they were expecting their first child. They had been trying for years and had almost given up hope, so the news was like a miracle to them. But as Mia's pregnancy progressed, she began to experience strange symptoms that she couldn't explain. She was constantly exhausted, no matter how much she slept. She had vivid and disturbing dreams that left her feeling anxious and afraid. And worst of all, she started to feel like she was being watched, like there was something in the room with her even when she was alone. Mia tried to ignore her feelings, thinking they were just a normal part of pregnancy. But as time went on, the symptoms only got worse. She started to see shadows moving in the corner of her eye, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. She heard whispers and footsteps in the middle of the night, but when she woke up, she was alone. As her due date drew near, Mia's anxiety reached a boiling point. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her pregnancy, that something was going to go horribly wrong. She tried to talk to Alex about it, but he dismissed her concerns as just normal pregnancy jitters. One night, as Mia was lying in bed, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. She woke Alex and they rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors tried to reassure Mia that everything was fine, but she knew in her heart that it wasn't. She felt like something was inside her, something that was causing her pain and taking control of her body. As she was lying in the hospital bed, Mia saw a shadow move across the room. She tried to ignore it, thinking it was just her imagination, but then she saw it again. This time it was closer, and she could make out the shape of a small, twisted figure with glowing eyes. Mia screamed and tried to get out of bed, but the figure moved closer and closer until it was standing right beside her. She could feel its breath on her face, and she knew that it wasn't there to help her. It was there to take her baby, to take everything she had ever wanted. Mia's heart raced as she realized the true horror of her situation. She was no longer in control of her body, and something dark and sinister had taken its place. She knew that whatever was happening to her, it was too late to stop it now. The doctors rushed into the room, but it was too late. Mia's baby had already been taken, stolen away by some unseen force. Mia was left feeling empty and alone, with nothing to show for the months of anticipation and excitement. As she lay in her hospital bed, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her, still lurking in the shadows. She could hear whispers and see strange movements out of the corner of her eye, but every time she tried to bring it up to the nurses or her husband, they dismissed it as a side effect of the trauma she had experienced. But Mia knew better. She knew that something was still after her, still trying to take everything she had left. She tried to ignore it, to focus on healing and moving on, but the fear never truly went away. Months later, as Mia was walking home from the grocery store, she saw a familiar figure out of the corner of her eye. It was small and twisted, with glowing eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Mia froze, her heart racing as she realized what was happening. The thing that had taken her baby was still with her, still haunting her every step. She tried to run, but her feet felt heavy and sluggish, as if something was holding her back. As she turned the corner, Mia saw a group of people standing in front of her house. They were dressed in black robes and had strange symbols painted on their faces, and Mia knew immediately that they were not there for any benign purpose. She tried to run again, but her feet wouldn't budge. The figures closed in on her, their glowing eyes fixated on her every move. Mia screamed and struggled, but it was no use. The last thing she saw before everything went black was a small, twisted figure emerging from the shadows, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. Mia was never seen again. Some say she was taken by the strange figures in black robes, while others believe that the thing that had haunted her during her pregnancy had finally caught up to her. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: the horror of pregnancy had claimed another victim, leaving only fear and darkness in its wake. The news of Mia's disappearance spread quickly through the town, and soon everyone knew the tragic story of her pregnancy and the mysterious events that had followed. People whispered about the strange figures in black robes, and some claimed to have seen the twisted figure with glowing eyes lurking in the shadows. Alex was left alone to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, haunted by the memory of his wife and the baby they had lost. He became obsessed with finding out what had happened to Mia, spending hours researching every possible lead and following every rumor that crossed his path. One night, as he was poring over old police reports and newspaper clippings, Alex heard a strange noise coming from outside. He got up to investigate, his heart racing with fear and anticipation. As he opened the front door, he saw a small, twisted figure standing on his doorstep, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. Alex tried to run, but the figure was too fast, and soon it had him in its grasp. The last thing Alex saw before everything went black was a group of figures in black robes emerging from the shadows, their eyes fixated on him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. When Alex woke up, he was lying in a dark, cramped room with no windows or doors. He could hear strange whispers and shuffling movements all around him, but he couldn't see anything in the pitch-black darkness. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Alex realized that he was not alone. There were other people in the room with him, all of them pale and emaciated, with hollow eyes and sunken cheeks. Alex tried to speak to them, to ask them what was going on, but they were all silent, their faces blank and expressionless. It was as if they had given up all hope of escape or salvation, resigned to their fate in the darkness. As the days turned into weeks, Alex felt his sanity slipping away. He could hear the whispers and movements growing louder and more insistent, and he knew that something terrible was about to happen. And then, one night, the door to the room creaked open, and a figure in a black robe stepped inside. Its eyes burned with a malevolent light, and Alex knew that he was in the presence of pure evil. The figure spoke in a low, hissing voice, promising Alex that he would be reunited with his wife and child if only he pledged his allegiance to the darkness. Alex tried to resist, but he was too weak and too desperate, and soon he found himself succumbing to the figure's twisted logic. And so Alex became one of them, trapped in the darkness with no hope of escape, his soul consumed by the horror of pregnancy and the dark forces that had claimed Mia and their unborn child. Emma had been feeling off for a while, but she didn't think much of it. She had put on a few pounds and was feeling more tired than usual, but she assumed it was just stress from work. She didn't even consider the possibility that she could be pregnant. But one day, Emma's stomach started to swell, and she realized with a jolt that she was carrying a child. Panic set in as she realized that she would have to tell her husband, Mark, who had always been a scary and unpredictable person. Emma had met Mark in college, and at first, he had seemed charming and charismatic. But as time went on, she began to see a darker side to him. He would fly into rages over the smallest things, and his moods were unpredictable and volatile. Emma knew that telling Mark about the pregnancy would set him off. He had always been clear that he didn't want children, and the thought of him finding out filled her with dread. But as the days went on, Emma's condition became harder and harder to hide. She knew that she couldn't keep it a secret forever, but the thought of telling Mark filled her with terror. Emma tried to come up with a plan, a way to break the news to Mark without setting him off. She even considered leaving him, but she knew that wouldn't be easy. Mark had always been possessive and controlling, and she was afraid of what he might do if she tried to leave. One night, as they sat in their living room watching TV, Emma worked up the courage to tell Mark. She started by telling him that she had been feeling unwell and went to see a doctor. Mark listened attentively, but as soon as Emma mentioned the word pregnancy, his expression changed. At first, he was quiet, and Emma could see the anger building behind his eyes. Suddenly, he jumped up from the couch and started pacing back and forth. Emma knew that she had made a mistake, and she tried to backpedal, but it was too late. Mark started yelling and throwing things, and Emma retreated to the safety of their bedroom. She could hear Mark's angry footsteps echoing through the house, and she knew that she had to get out before he hurt her. Emma packed a bag and slipped out of the house, knowing that she could never go back. She didn't know where she was going or what she would do, but she knew that she had to protect her unborn child from the wrath of her terrifying husband. Emma spent the next few weeks staying with friends and trying to figure out what to do next. She was scared and alone, but she knew that she couldn't go back to Mark. As her due date drew closer, Emma started to feel more and more anxious. She didn't have a plan, and she didn't have anyone to turn to. She knew that she needed help, but she didn't know where to find it. One night, as she lay in bed, Emma's water broke. She knew that she had to act fast, but she was too scared to go to the hospital. Instead, she called an ambulance and waited nervously for it to arrive. As the paramedics rushed her to the hospital, Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that she was going to have a difficult road ahead of her, but she was determined to do whatever it took to keep her baby safe. In the end, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and she knew that she had made the right decision in leaving Mark. She named her daughter Hope, a symbol of the new life that she had created for herself and her child. Emma never went back to Mark, and she spent the rest of her life raising Hope on her own. It wasn't always easy, but she knew that she had made the right decision, and she was grateful for the strength that she had found in herself. Thanks for watching this True Pregnancy Horror Stories video. If you have some horror stories, leave a comment with your story and maybe you see your story in the upcoming videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I see you by the next video.